Hello everyone, this is Shankar. Welcome all of you to this Selenium 3.0, which is the latest version. Basically, it's a 3.6 is precisely the latest version. But from the major version, we call it as 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. So these are like major versions of the Selenium. So welcome to the Selenium 3.0 orientation session. So in this session, I'm going to take about good 35 minutes of explaining what we are going to learn in this course, how the schedule looks like, and what you're going to get out of this entire course. I'll list out the various topics in detail as much as possible, so that will be clear of what we're going to learn. And after that, I'll spend good 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. Happy to take up any questions that you have. Before that, quick introduction about myself. My name is Shankar. I have been associated with iTeLearn for about 3 years now. I handled various sessions related to Selenium. I do take care of QFT, do take care of QA fundamentals that are expected to any of the people who joined for the QA for the first time. I do take care of ISTQB certification training, take care of HP ALM related training, Jira, Bugzilla. Yeah, predominantly these are some of them, and I do take care of Selenium with complete advanced topics like we are going to discuss in a minute as well, related to the Maven, Jenkins, Git and GitHub. So these are all part of anyway our discussion as well. So, and overall industry experience, I have close to 15 years of experience. Currently working as a QA, senior QA lead, and coming to the teaching experience, I have close to 13 years of training experience, facilitating online classroom trainings. So that's a quick intro about me. Okay. And I'm sure some of you have joined other part of the courses with iTeLearn where you might get to see some of my videos. Along the major train is obviously Karthik, who will also come back and take few sessions as needed, but currently is busy with a couple of other organizations like Workers INC, which is associated with the iTeLearn, where he is actually focusing on a couple of web development projects. And I'm sure you all might have attended any odd framework related training where iTeLearn is actually, Workers INC is building a framework which is similar to like a lot of other competitive frameworks that are available in the market. So using the Selenium as a Selenium library, rather, I would say, as a backend, but building a framework for various organizations. So it's just live soon, and we are adding a couple of more features to it. So you'll hear more about it. So right now, Karthik is focusing on that. So I would be assisting you or facilitating this Selenium sessions. So let's look at what we're going to learn, the overall part of the Selenium. Before that, I just quickly show the schedule that's available. So here is a quick snap of the schedule that what we are going to do today, and that is 16th and 19th. We will be having the orientation session, which is free sessions. And these two will give you a complete picture of what you're going to learn in the Selenium course, whether you are a beginner or you already know a bit of Selenium, or you're just coming from a manual testing background, or you may be just joining both manual and the automation together. So you're going to understand today and 19th the complete picture of what you're going to learn. And then we will be starting with the sessions on 26th, which will go up to 17th November, which are 15 paid sessions. So, and to be frank, when I list out the topics will be very vast. It will definitely go beyond 15 sessions. So each of these session is going to be around 60 minutes minimum, and you can expect less than 80 to 90 minutes. Even then 15 sessions with the topics that I'm going to list out in few minutes, it will be not sufficient. So what we're going to do is some of the regular topics that there is no change since or soon after Selenium has been released, or since Selenium has been released, there are certain things that have never changed. Okay, so those things, what we would expect is we would expect you to just go watch the video that I have done it in the previous batches. We almost do every 2 months a new batch, so you can just get to watch some of those previous videos, but which are changing dynamically, which are very important. Definitely everything will be done through live training. So that's on the Selenium WebDriver Advanced, WebDriver Basics plus Advanced. We will be having 15 live sessions, and then you'll be having another 7 to 8 videos that you need to watch. So that will be more sufficient for the thing. And then we'll get into advanced topics where we'll talk about the Maven, Jenkins, Git, and GitHubs. And then I'll also be talking about the behavior-driven development, how does the Agile and Scrum methodology works. So that's also will be part of this. And then we'll talk about Cucumber, which is a behavior-driven development tool. And then we'll talk about robot framework using Python, is about another 5 sessions. Then people will, this is more of any or certified course, so who are part of that will get to see. Otherwise, your things will end up here. And if you are interested, you can always come back and do the Selenium Live project with us, which is going to take about 8 to 10 sessions. So at a very high level, this is the schedule. So we really want it to be a schedule driven so that you all can plan your things very well when you think you will be done with the training and when you think you can start soon applying for the jobs. So we are all going to assist you in resume preparation and with frequently asked questions, etc. So you can plan your tasks well. So any questions on the schedule at high level? Or it would be better to hold the questions for a few minutes. Once I drill down on the topics that what we're going to learn, it will be more easy to take up the questions as well. So what I'm going to do, I'll straight away discuss the things in the Google Drive that we are going to share with you so that you can actually refer to this at any point of the time. So I'll just open one Google Doc. Selenium 3.0 live training. What we're going to learn, we'll come to know each of these. So just quick question, you can put your response in the chat. How many of you are already familiar with any automation tool? Does anybody know any automation in this attendees list? Okay. Okay. I'll just give you the quick summary by going through it. Not really like when I say automation tool, definitely any tool is a great tool in terms of acceptance testing level, because we really wanted to hide the complexities of the Selenium in the back, and we wanted to give you a nice UI or a very user-friendly UI where without really having a technical knowledge can also create the framework. We need to go one more down the level in the Selenium, because that's more like a acceptance test framework level. Now, if you go into the actual core Selenium level, then you will have to do a little bit of programming, little bit of scripting. So I'm asking more from that perspective. Does anybody knows? How about others? Just quick yes no will help me to analyze it better so that I can give more broader picture. I would have done a survey for it, but I all trust you're just going to put the information. So I'm getting almost like a 50-50%, like 50% of the people are definitely saying no, so it is a good mix so that I can actually deal with a very fundamental level. And then rest of the 50 people are saying, I know another tool, I know tool like UFT, I know tool like one or two is saying I know the basics of Selenium with Java. Okay. And yes, I think this is a very good mix where we have more than 50% of the people actually saying I don't have any automation training. Very few people are saying I know another automation tool, but not really Selenium. Hardly I could see one or two people being saying that I know Selenium. I'm very confident even if you know Selenium bit of it, these sessions are going to be totally different. The way we are going to deal it and kind of provide to the details will be obviously take you to the next level. So that's the confidence that I can say. All right. So what we're going to do in the overall thing is like the very first thing that we're going to do is understand the need of automation testing. So typically assuming that anybody moving from a manual testing, why there is a need of an automation testing comes into picture. So we'll be just covering that as part of today and the next orientation session. Then we'll talk about the different automation tools that are available in the market. I can even talk about them now. So we have tools that are related to functional testing automation. We have load performance testing related automation. We have test process management tool related automation. So I don't want you to confuse when somebody talking about a tool which is related to a functional testing versus non-functional testing or related to a test process management tool. So a very high level difference is you all know about functional testing. Even if somebody is attending the QA fundamentals by now, you should have been familiar with what is a functional testing, right? Say a website is given to you, an application is given to you, you will ensure the functionality of the application end to end is working as expected by the corresponding user story or as expected by the customer requirement. So that is called functional testing. But load performance testing, security testing, all other areas are slightly different, where you're going to focus on how much load it can support, what is the performance of my application, response of the application. Test process management tools are like the tools that I'm talking about, Atlassian Jira or HPLM. These tools will help you to track the complete testing related documents, right from the requirements, test cases, test execution information, defects, dashboards related to the test execution status, or your user stories in an agile. So that is totally a different area that I'm talking about. And ideally, you will not have any programming there. It's more like a repository tool. You store the information, retrieve it, and you get the reports out of it. So this is not really it is important being a QA, but it not really comes under automation when I say if somebody asks you what automation tools you're familiar. Load performance testing tools like I'm talking about WebLoad, NeoLoad, LoadRunner, Microsoft Visual Studio Test Suite, etc., where you do a bit of definitely a programming there. But we are more interested in the category of functional testing automation. And when it comes to functional testing automation, we have commercial tools and freeware tools. Freeware, or you can say open source. The difference is very simple. Commercial tools like HP UFT, Microsoft Visual Studio Test Suite. These are some of the commercial tools where you have to pay for the license, pay for the usage on an yearly basis, and they definitely come up with a lot of inbuilt. All you need to do if somebody is working on a UFT, just you have to install the tool. Everything is ready for you. You don't need to really do any customizations or integrations as you proceed and as you work. And whereas we have the open source or freeware tools like Selenium, you need to take care of everything on your own. It's free, it's open source, freely available. You don't need to pay for any license. Okay, somebody's saying audio. Can you all hear me good? Is there any audio issue? Just want to confirm. Hope you all can hear me good, right? Okay. All right. So when I'm saying the difference between the commercial and the freeware tools is commercial tool, everything comes as inbuilt. Just install the software. Everything will be ready for you. You don't need to really download any of the components from anywhere else and integrate it to your system. The best example is HP UFT. If somebody knows it, you need to just install the UFT tool. All is available for you. But the problem here is the license software. It's pretty costly. A lot of organizations cannot afford, especially companies like startup, mid-level companies cannot really afford the licensed versions. That is where we have open source tools or freeware tools. We have so many other freeware tools, but the number one or the best tool that is being used for the last 5 to 6 years by most of the companies is the Selenium. Selenium was almost there in the industry for a decade, almost 10 years now, if you look into the Selenium 1.0. But the last 4 or 5 years, if you see, most of the companies have switched from any other tool that they were using to the Selenium. The only it's freeware, good for the organizations, no license cost, but from a automation test engineer point of view, who actually uses the Selenium from a development point of view, you will definitely have a couple of challenges faced in terms of, like, since it's an open source, you cannot expect everything to be readily available for you. That's where the training helps for you. For example, even to use the Selenium, from where to download. Okay, once you download the Selenium, if you want to work with different things, for example, if you want to work with a JUnit test, okay, how can I get and work with my JUnit test in Selenium? Or if I have to work with a TestNG test, how can I do it? Not everything is readily available you in the IDE that you're going to develop. In fact, to use the Selenium itself, you can use Eclipse IDE or IntelliJ IDE that's available for Java. So from where can I get that? Even to work with this, first of all, I need to install Java on my machine. So how can I do the Java? So everything will be little challenging if you have really worked on a commercial tools and come into the open source, you'll feel a bit of a difficult there. And that's where the detailed training is going to help you. We're going to take care of every single aspect in a very detailed way that you really don't know. And then we'll discuss in the scratch level. But once you have the things ready and integrated into your system, now it's free to the organization, so nobody needs to spend any money. And since the tool is available for a decade and for the last 4 or 5 years people are using it, there's a lot of help available over internet. Quick of a search on the Google will find the help if we get into any problem. And I'm going to do it most of the times during the training itself. If I get stuck, all I'm going to do is search in the Google and figure it out, do your own analysis, what best works out for you, and pick up the configurations or the integrations and do it with your tool and start working. So that's how you would expect it in a open source tool. And all these applications, functional testing automation applications, are available for your Windows applications, web-based applications, and mobile related applications. So you can expect the category available into these things. Selenium can be the best, or I would say it is popularly used and it's available for only at the moment web-based applications. And if you can integrate with another library called Appium, then you can actually work with mobile related applications, but not at the moment for Windows based applications. So that's the only limitation of it at this point of the time. But you can definitely but major applications that what we have in the market are either related to web based or related to mobile applications. So that's the need of current trend, and that is what is being sufficed by the Selenium. So is a quick intro of where does the automation testing tools come into picture. And this is Selenium is majorly for, so now I can say Selenium is used for functional testing, automation for web-based and mobile applications. That's the main thing, because you have other areas like non-functional testing, you have Windows-based applications, but this is the primary need, or this is the primary usage of the Selenium applications in the market. And again, if you talk about any of these automation tools, they will have a basic recording and playback feature. For example, if you have worked on HP UFT, you can actually do a basic recording, and then you can do your customization of the code. Okay, why I'm trying to do always comparison with HPFT, not that I'm familiar, but some of you might have been familiar, and maybe in the trend of shifting from that to the Selenium, that's why I'm trying to use. But actually we can avoid that. If we don't really need the comparison, we can straight away get into the tool, and we can talk about only Selenium point of view as well. But typically, most of the automation tools in the market will have a basic recording and playback where you can configure which application you're going to test, and do a basic recording on that. And then on top of it, you can develop it. So when you do this, the tools will use some scripting languages. Okay, it will use some of the scripting languages. For example, HPUFT will use either VBScript or JavaScript. If you go into Microsoft Visual Studio Test Suite, you can write the code in C#, and then a couple of other languages that are related to Microsoft technologies. But the moment when you come to Selenium, the major thing that people will use is, though it's not a scripting language, it's not like a JavaScript, but we call it as a scripting language from an automation point of view, is mostly or widely used is Java. But that's not the only thing. You can even write your programs in Python. You can do it in Ruby, Ruby on Rails, etc. So for recording and playback, yes, it supports it. Currently it is not doing any enhancements. They're not doing any enhancements, but something we have a tool called IDE. Okay, Selenium IDE is something that you can use it for recording and playback. And then we have the language that can be used is either Java, Python, Ruby. So any of these languages, you can convert the code, and you can start developing your scripts according to that. 90% of the whole discussion that we're going to do with the Selenium, we're going to do with Java, but I do help you on a bit on Python and Ruby, how you can actually convert, and how we can do that. So anywhere you heard of IDE, it stands for Integrated Development Environment. Okay, not just in case of Selenium, but if somebody talks about Visual Studio, it's an IDE. They say it's an Integrated Development Environment. Java, Eclipse, it's called an IDE. It's also integrated development, where people can develop the script, develop the program, develop the applications. That is what is called IDE. Okay, it stands for Integrated Development Environment. All right, so the major discussion, 80 to 90% of the discussion will be on the Java, but I'll definitely be helping you on Python and Ruby, how you can generate the code, so that if somebody in need of that, you can actually focus on, and we do have videos previously done it on Python. I'll ensure that will be available for you. No, not IDE is version 3.0. That's where the difference. So in Selenium, we call it as Selenium Libraries. Okay. So I'll just quickly show you. You can find all the information that is related to Selenium in seleniumhq.org. And if you go in downloads, what you can see right now, Selenium standalone server, which is 3.6.0. So I'm talking about this. Before this, there were two major versions, which was Selenium 2.0, and that has gone up to 2.53 is what I was familiar, but I think it would have gone up to 2.6 as well. Before that, we had Selenium 1 version, which is very old story. We don't need to really talk about. People like you starting, just start with the fresh, start with only directly on the 3.0, to be frank, because when it started, it had lots of classical way of doing the things like, and now it's so popular. For example, when it has to come to primarily, we said Selenium is for web-based application. So which browsers it can work? So there is ideally a question comes in your mind, which browsers it can work. When the Selenium was introduced, let me tell you, by default it used to be working with only Firefox, and later on they added extra plugins, or that are required to work with Internet Explorer and Chrome. But today it's so popular, everything has to be taken care by the Selenium people to support. For example, there is a new version of Chrome was available in the market, or new version of Firefox was available in the market. Previously, Selenium used to take care of supporting that, but today it's so popular and lots of companies are using it. I heard the recent news in the Selenium HQ website. The companies, the browsers companies, for example, in case of Internet Explorer and Edge, Microsoft, Google Chrome, obviously Google, they are taking care of supporting it for the Selenium. So because the popularity that the Selenium has gained, the companies are helping the Selenium to support it. Otherwise, otherwise there is a good amount of people who are using Selenium cannot use our browsers, right? There is an obviously need of organizations to support. But 5 years back, the story was totally different. Yeah, as somebody saying ID is not working on the latest Firefox, you're perfectly all right. So we have to go back to less than 37, Firefox version of 37 point something, then only it will work. So I really think of now actually directly start on the WebDriver, but there could be some people it might help you if I spend some sessions on the IDE. So, but what encourages by the Selenium is actually is directly start work with WebDriver. That's what is the recommendation. So it's going to support Firefox, Chrome, IE, your Edge browser, Safari. You name a browser, it supports all the browsers. Again, the best thing to look at is in here. And the languages that I just talked about it, these are the different languages. It will support C# as well. So Java, C#, Ruby, Python, JavaScript that you can do. These are the browsers it will support. I'm sorry. I think it just clicked on it. So you can work on any of these browsers: Chrome, Opera, Edge, Ghost Driver, HTML Unit Driver, Safari, related to Windows Phone, BlackBerry, Appium. So all these different browsers it will support. So the moment when we say web application, obviously there is a need arises for us to test it on different cross browsers. So Selenium is very famous for cross browser testing as well, because you write the code once related to maybe a Firefox, and you would expect that to work on different other browsers without really changing much of the code. You need to ensure to work on other browsers. So that's where the cross browser testing that comes into the picture. Okay. So we're going to majorly work on Java as a programming language, but it supports various other things. And there is a good amount of percentage of people who will use Selenium with C# as well, because let's say their application is developed in C#, their entire developer team is in C#, so there may be a need arises for the QA team also to use C#. But again, the percentage is a bit less. As I told you, 80% of the market captured by Java. So if you can learn the whole, so it's not just about learning Selenium. So now you need to know about the Java language also, not to the extent of advanced, but you should be definitely knowing to the core Java. Then only you will be able to write all the conditions, conditional and control statements. Then only you'll understand the object-oriented programming concepts. So all that will be part of the course. So there's nothing you need to do it anything separate. It'll all will be taken care. Okay, so this is a quick intro of the Selenium, what it can support and how it can work for you. So any questions before I proceed further? So if you look into the various topics that we're going to deal, you can get it from our website as well, but I just want to take this opportunity to talk about the details of what we're going to learn. So in the very first, we'll talk with the introduction to Selenium in more greater detail level, so that even people who don't know anything about it will understand. I will give a quick snapshot of what was there in 1.0, 2.0, and what is actually being available in 3.0. Okay, so yes, we are going to look at the latest version of WebDriver, correct? You need to definitely know the Java. That's what I was telling you, and I will be taking care of it. I will be covering that. If Selenium 2.0 is already installed, do we need to uninstall and install? No, you're actually not going to install anything in Selenium, to be frank. That's another difference. For example, if you had another automation tool like UFT, and if you have installed a previous version on top of it, whether I install the latest version or not is a question. So here it's all everything through jar files, Java runtime libraries. All you need to do is you will go to your IDE, not Selenium IDE, your actual Java IDE, whether it is an Eclipse or IntelliJ. You'll simply replace the older jar files with the latest jar files. That's all. There's nothing like you'll be installing. Is it clear? All right. So it's everything through the Java runtime libraries here. That's one thing that I can say. It's just more like removing the older jar files and adding it. But the challenge lies in knowing the jar files, which jar file I have to use for what. Okay, I'm going to list out various topics, and there will be different jar files that we are going to use it for each of them. So we'll start with a quick introduction to Selenium, more in greater detail even than what I just talked about it. Then we will be working with Selenium IDE for about 3 sessions at least, so that you can get familiarized of how to do recording and playback. You will understand few customizations, or basically assertions for your test cases. How can you add it? The biggest thing that I'm going to talk about here is how the locators identified in Selenium. So typically Selenium, like any automation tool, right, when you record or when you develop a script, what is locator that we're talking about? For example, if my application is, let's say, QAnoair.com, some sort of a website, each of these called locators. This image is a locator. This search field is a locator. This list box or links are locators. This button is a locator, right? So you, in a typical application, you will have different locators, and these locators will have different locators will have different properties provided by the developer. So when the developer actually develops it, he'll provide various properties. And all the automation tools, what they tries to do is, when you record or when you try to develop a script on those applications, it will see what are the unique properties that the locator will have, and it will try to capture that information. So when you play back, it will use that information to play back exactly on the same object or same locator on your application. So you need to be very strong in understanding what actually happens when I record internally, be it an HPUFT or Selenium. You should really be knowing what happens when you record a test. So Selenium, what happens? There are about 8 different ways a locator will be identified. We will be discussing all those different 8 types. Like typically, it goes with something called ID. So if there is a unique ID for every control, that will be picked up first. If not, there will be something called unique. If not, it will use something called class name. If not, there will be something called tag name. Otherwise, you will definitely have something like link text in case of links. If not, you will have something called XPath, which is very important. And then we have CSS, Cascade Style Sheet, way of identifying. So we have got ID, name, class name, tag name. There will be something called text as well. Some controls will have text. You can either go with the text or you can go with link text, XPath, and CSS. So I'll be discussing with each one of these is an example how different controls will have different ways of identifying the locators. We'll be discussing them in a great detail with an example how that can happen. So we're going to look at how the script will be generated, how your Selenium will identify these controls using this. If we spend that time in IDE itself and get familiarized, when we go to WebDriver, you will already be a master with that, and you can actually start directly writing them. Okay, so that's what we're going to spend there. So once we have three good sessions of discussions on the IDE, that will be the right time to go and start working with the actual way of developing your scripting through the Eclipse and the WebDriver. So we'll look at how do we install the Java. So I'll assume people would have not worked with Java previously. So I'll go from a very fundamental level of how can you install the Java, how can you install the Eclipse IDE. Uh, there are few percentage of people who will use IntelliJ, but I would prefer Eclipse IDE compared to IntelliJ. So we will work with Eclipse IDE from where you can get and how you can install this. Then configuring the Selenium 3.0 with Eclipse. So this is where the real challenge comes, and a lot of people who wanted to do on their own, to be frank, without training or without a help, that's where most of the people will left, or they'll just leave the Selenium. Okay, they don't know how to install the Java, they don't know how to install Eclipse IDE, how to configure these Eclipse with the Selenium, which are but in other commercial tools, like, you don't need to really do all these things. You just install the tool, everything will be ready. But as I told you here, you need to do it everything on your own, and that's where the training helps. Not just this, as you go into every topic requires a different jar files, different sometimes you maybe require var files. So it's everything, you have to download it from the net, and then you have to configure it with your Eclipse. So beginning of the topic will be challenging on how to configure and how to do it, especially complex topics like when we go into Selenium Grid, it will be much more challenging. Maven will be a little bit of challenging if you don't know or if you're not really part of the training. Jenkins for continuous integration, continuous deployment will be challenging. How do you push your code into Git and GitHub will be a little difficult. So everything that will try to make it smooth with the help of the training. So we'll get into installing the Java, installing Eclipse IDE, then configuring your Selenium with Eclipse IDE. So that's when we'll create a very simple Java test first to check whether IDE and Java everything is fine. Then we will start creating basic test with Selenium WebDriver. So WebDriver, when we talk about, you're going to use the actual development environment IDE, and you will be writing the program. Till now, when you work with IDE, probably it will only majorly be doing the coding. You're not going to really do any of the major coding there. But the moment you start working with WebDriver and with the Selenium libraries and the Eclipse IDE, this is where you will start writing the code. Okay, and then we'll look at with tests for different browsers. Like default comes with Firefox, but we'll definitely see with Heidi, Chrome, Edge, and other browsers. How can we create my test so that you can actually do a cross-browser testing as well. Then again, I will show various examples on all these things. Create examples for different locators first. Locators, like, we're going to deal with various controls like a web edit box, a list box, a combo box, a grid, or a table. We'll see how you can actually work with a grid or a table. Typically, any application that you're going to work, considering it as a web, you'll see there are various controls. Like, you will have a text box where you enter username and password kind of thing. You will have a checkbox where you will say remember me, or or unselect that, and then you will have a button. So typically you click on the button to proceed further, and when you get into the home page, there could be different links, there could be different images, there could be a search field in which you search and you get the data in a table, right? There are various different controls. Let me tell you, your knowledge bank of Selenium, if somebody ask if, and all these things are part of WebDriver basics actually. So let's list it out, like what we're going to do in WebDriver basics. All these things are part of the basics, and there will be advanced as well later. So if somebody knows that, or somebody says I know WebDriver basics or I know WebDriver, typically they would expect you to know different, you have an experience of working with the different locators like that, as I'm talking about: edit box, list box, combo box, checkbox, radio button, links, images, grid or a table, frames. Typically, your web application is a collection of frames, right? So you should have worked with some of those frames, because a typical web page is divided into various frames, or in the word of Selenium, we call it as iframes. And in the frame, you will have different locators. So all those things we're going to look at and examples on working with them. Please put your questions in the chat if you have. I'll happy to help as related. So then we'll create different tests on working with locator. Of course, examples on different locator identification strategy. So in IDE, I will be discussing each one of those identification, how it identifies, and here we will be definitely creating few examples on with ID by name, by XPath. So the moment when we talk about the XPath and CSS, or even for identifying all this, we need to work with a couple of tools like Firebug. In Internet Explorer, you will have something called developer tools, and then there is something called XPath checker. So there are different tools available, and we need to discuss in great detail of what is an XPath, how do you write an absolute XPath, relative XPath, what is CSS, how do you create a CSS value for a particular control. So these are a little bit of robust topics, and requires a great explanation of various examples. That itself will take 1 to 2 sessions. Okay, so Sirish has a question, probably, and most of you would have rather. I have no experience in coding, so will you be teaching the Java and a too long one? That's exactly the whole idea. I mean, we start from a very fundamental level of understanding what is an object-oriented programming, what is a class, what is an object, what is a method, and what will happen when you define a method. How do you define or declare variables? How do you call method from one class into another class? And then to an extent where I'll be discussing out in the topic in advanced, something called page object model or page factory, which is a design factory in Java. So we go to that level of thing. But what is required from you, to be frank, if I spend 60 to 70 minutes in teaching, probably I would have covered definitely 4 to 5 good examples or good scripts. You need to replicate the similar thing for different locators, at least another 5 to 10 examples. That makes you perfect. Okay, someone says, I have been working as a performance tester for more than 7 years. My question is, Selenium, how can it help me? So Selenium is majorly for a functional testing, but if you are using a performance tool which can take, um, obviously, I mean, not everybody knows performance testing here, but to answer your question, when you create a performance test, there will be obviously a functional test case underneath it, right? And that functional test case is what you're going to run, and you will calculate how much time it has been taken, how many users working, etc. So if the performance testing tool that you are using can accept the Java code or Python code or Ruby code or C# code, you're almost there, because you have to create your functional scenarios in any of these languages, and this should go as an input to your performance testing tool. After that, you will create your performance test scenario, how many users, and corresponding to this scenario, it will calculate the response time. So in a way, if you think you're going to use functional testing through Java or C# into your performance testing, definitely it's going to help you. Does Selenium supports testing scenarios such as launching Chrome as a different user when you want to test a web application, signing as a different user, etc.? Yes, to an extent, we can definitely, uh, at least like I have been used them in the real time, but I've not really taught them in the learning point of view, because these are like very edge case scenarios or very typical scenarios when uh, you want to work with a common user after logging into your application. But I don't see any reason why it won't support. So we can look at an example. All right. So we'll look at examples on different locator identification strategies. Then there are different methods. Like again, there are a lot of predefined methods to to validate scenarios. Like uh, a, a locator exists or not, right? Locator exists or not, and then we will be using implicit and explicit weights. For example, this is more of a synchronization. Not always that your application and the automation script goes in hand. For example, you create a script, let's say launch this application, enter this value, click on this, check this object is available or not, and then do something else. So you have a sequence of steps in your script, and your application may be fast enough to match with the synchronization of your automation script, or sometimes your application is behaving a bit slow, which is not in sync with your script. So that's where you need to work with something called implicit and explicit wait statements, which is to synchronize your test with the application. So we'll be discussing all that. And then we'll also talk about how do we create a unit test for the code that you're going to write using JUnit. Okay, so JUnit is typically used for unit testing by the developers, and we can also, if you want to add some of the test cases, you can also create a JUnit test. So for that, again, we'll have to download the required jar file, add it to our test along with the Selenium libraries. So the JUnit test will be available for you, and you can create your script in the form of with certain annotations, like typically at the rate test annotation is what majorly used. You can create it as a test so that you can get to see the results at the test level, whether the test has been completed, not completed, etc. So I'll come back and list out if there are any basics that I missed out. Otherwise, we will be getting into WebDriver advanced topics. This is where we'll be creating a TestNG framework. So we'll be working with TestNG. This is again a framework which is available for system testing. Apart from the JUnit framework that you have, this is majorly used for your system testing or functional testing. And the TestNG itself will take about good 2 sessions to understand how do you group your test, how do you prioritize your test, and there are various annotations that you're going to use within the TestNG, like @test, @before test, @after test, @before method, @after method. And also there is another very important annotation called parameter, or I would say @parameter. This will help us to do data driven test. Okay, and then we will understand how can we actually pass parameters through TestNG. Then we will discuss what is the difference between TestNG and JUnit when we actually get into it at a very detailed level. So these are the different various annotations that you won't find it in JUnit. JUnit is majorly for a basic unit testing level that your developers will use. You can create your test into small unit tests and compare the results, etc. But TestNG provides much more frameworks, very good reporting, which is in the form of HTML, JSON kind of reporting. And a lot of people who use Selenium also use the TestNG as their major framework. So we'll have to discuss in a great detail level of how we work with TestNG. Again, to do that, as I told you, for every single topic, you will require some plugin or a jar file that you have. So in this case, we require a TestNG with Eclipse plugin that we have to install, and then we have to add TestNG library, and then we'll go create test into it. And then there is a testng.xml file in which you're going to write your class path, and then you're going to put your tests to run it. So this itself requires a good 2 to 3 sessions of discussion, and this will help us in creating a data-driven test using TestNG, which is a major framework that a lot of people who requires to test the application with various different sets of data. Same application, but you need to test with multiples of data. You're going to use a data-driven test or data-driven framework. We'll see how we can do that with the TestNG. Then we'll talk about working with Excel files using Apache POI. Again, you're going to go to a different organization's jar files, which is basically from an Apache organization. You download all the jar files that are required to work with Excel files, or in fact, Apache PY jar files are for working with entire MS Office. You can work with your Word files, Excel files, PowerPoint, etc. We get download these files and integrate with our Selenium. Then we'll create a couple of tests. So create tests to read data from Excel, read data, write data to and from Excel. And then we'll again create a data-driven test with Excel this time. And also we're going to look at a great extent of how do we do this keyword-driven framework, or keyword-driven test using, again, obviously the Excel majorly. So once we understand how do we work with PY, then we can see an examples on data-driven test. We can see examples on keyword-driven test. As some of you might be familiar how the keyword-driven works is, you would like to develop a framework so typically organization would expect not everybody to spend on coding, not everybody to do, or in a team of 10 people of QA, not everybody is familiar with writing the low level of programming in the Selenium, Java, etc. So there will be good 2 to 3 people. We'll leverage them for developing the frameworks like this kind of a keyword-driven framework, and they came up with or they will come up with a good, but I want you to be in one of those 3 people that I'm talking about in a team of 5. That's the whole idea. Why we're going to spend a good amount of time in learning, developing the frameworks, etc. Because when there is an opportunity to lose some of the people, let me tell you, you will not be in that list when you can actually develop the frameworks and write the code. So there will be top 20-30 people who will be actually developing the frameworks like keyword driven, data driven, hybrid frameworks, etc. And the remaining 60-70% of the QA people, they'll be simply using those keywords and writing plain English language test steps in an Excel. We'll discuss in detail how it works and all. That itself will take a good amount of 2 to 3 sessions again, which I cannot really cover in the orientation. But as the name suggests, the framework developer will give simple English language keywords like launch browser or open browser, click on a button, or select a value from a list, or search a value in a table or a grid. So they'll give a simple English language keywords and write a corresponding method for it in the actual Selenium Java code. And the people who are going to use this framework, they don't need to really know the underneath code, how it is developed and all. All they need to know is a keyword and just use the keyword and write the simple English language statement. Here is my URL, and they say, open this browser in the browser of Chrome or Firefox. And you will be actually writing the code in the function to launch that application in that browser. So we'll see how we can do all the data-driven tests, keyword-driven frameworks, etc. In the advanced WebDriver. And as I told you, we'll be working with, of course, database testing using JDBC, Java Database Connectivity. So we'll work with a couple of database test scenarios as well. Then we'll talk about Selenium Grid, which helps us to do parallel testing. Suppose you have created various tests, and at the same time, you have to run your tests on, let's say, Windows operating system with IE. Then other case you have to run with a Macintosh on a Firefox, for example. And then you have a mobile application with one of its browser. So you have developed these tests individually, but you may wanted to run all of them parallelly because you have that capability in the Selenium and you don't need to really do one by one sequentially. So in that case, we are going to use something called Selenium Grid, which is going to help us to do the parallel testing, cross-browser testing, or cross-operating system testing. We're going to look at, again, that itself will take good 2 sessions to how do you configure your grid, how do you create your nodes, and then how do you run these tests on these different nodes. So will require a good amount of an explanation. So we'll look at how do we actually work with Selenium Grid. There are a lot of small topics. I'm not even listing them. As we go, we will be require them to learn in a great detail. So we talked about database testing, keyword driven. Majorly, these what we're going to look at are data driven, keyword driven framework, hybrid. Of course, we'll talk about what is a hybrid framework and how do you create a hybrid framework. Once we have all these things, then we will get into something called continuous integration and continuous deployment. Okay, so another thing that's very important that I have forgot is the page object model framework. Very important. Most of the companies use this page object model, or you can say page factory. It's one of the design factory method. Um, yeah, so page object model or page factory, typically what we would try to do in this method is your application might have 10-20 pages, your web application. For each of the page there are different controls and there are different operations you're going to perform. Suppose you have a e-commerce application and there is a item search page in which you'll have various controls to search the items, and you'll have search by category, search by name. There are different operations you're going to perform. All that we are going to write into one class of object oriented programming. So like this, if there are 10 pages, you're going to create 10 different classes. The advantages that we're going to get it is, rather than writing everything into one single class file, now I know if there is a code change that is going to happen in my application where I have to fix it in my automation. I'll straight away go to the corresponding class of the page and I will fix the object identification strategy that is being changed. If it was previously there was a name X used and now it's being using a Y, so I'll go where to fix it. And there was a search operation with certain things and now it is enhanced to a different version, so I'll go where to fix it. So it's more like creating a class file for each of your web page, putting all the controls or locators and the corresponding methods into that, and then developing a framework on top of it. So we'll look at how do we work with it. It's very popular. A lot of people use this in today's world. So we'll talk about page object model, page factory. So then we'll get into something which is more advanced and would expect as part of today's DevOps model, continuous integration, continuous deployment, is that if you just know only Selenium and only how to write a code or how to develop these frameworks is still not sufficient. It's good enough for an individual independent automation testing team, but as together today's world would expect you to work along with the developers and the operations team, because there's more of a dynamic builds are getting generated on a daily basis. Some companies do it on a weekly basis, but some companies demands it on a daily basis. Every day there will be a new build gets generated, and your regression scripts. Somebody was asking, can we use it for a regression testing? Yeah, that's the main purpose of. When I say functional testing, I would have been more explicit saying functional regression testing automation. Automation itself used majorly for a regression where you're going to repeat your testing again and again and again. Let me tell you, if you're just going to repeat only once or twice, and after that, if you expect this project will not be there, then we are not going to really do an automation. Okay, so if you miss, okay, Nita has a question. If you miss any class, that's the advantage that we have here is if you miss any class, it will be available as a video, and every single day post my session within 2 to 3 hours, you will get to see this video. And people who attended also, I am not going to expect that you will understand 100% with only the examples that I give. So you have to go back, watch this video like a movie again, not really like pause and play, but always like watch it like a movie. Then you do practice on your own without really looking into the video is when you actually learn the things. So you need to do three things. 99% try to attend the session. That is the most important thing. For any 1% good reason, if you missed out a session to attend, then you will definitely, the video will be available. But people who attended the session also, when you start practicing it, watch the video again, then you will get the complete picture. Then you try to do it on your own. And wherever you get struck, probably that's when you should look back the examples. And you should also start making your own scripting notes and everything, because people will have different styles of learning. So adapt all those learning specialities that you have, and then you'll do it. But three things you have to do: attend the session, watch the video, and do the practice. Fourth important thing is, I might have covered, as I told you, 4 or 5 examples in that won't be 100% sufficient. You need to spend and do another 4 or 5 examples on different controls, not the same controls. Then your knowledge bank will be more. So to answer your question, Nita, straight away, video will be available to you within 3 to 4 hours of the same day. So to get into this continuous integration, continuous deployment, and you might have heard about this DevOps coming up and all that. To do that, people would expect everything to go on automated way. Like developers will build the code, testers will have to run the regression testing, then there is a acceptance testing that needs to run, and then it has to go into production in a very sequential way. So for that, you need to know how do we work with Apache Maven, integrate Selenium with Maven, and create Maven test. Okay, we're going to look at that. Then you should also be definitely knowing what is a Git and GitHub, which is a version control system used by most of the organizations. So you need to maintain your Selenium code into one of these version control systems like Git and GitHub, or you may be creating your test with Maven. So this Maven is going to help us to take care of build management and dependencies. Like I told you, there are various jar files you're going to talk about, and those jar files will go through different versions on a day-to-day basis. So you develop a code and you give it to your colleague, and your colleague will try to reuse it, but you're using a different version of the jar, he's using a different version of the jar. So Apache Maven will help us to take care of all those things. Okay, so we're going to look at that, and then we look at Git and GitHub, and then we look at something called Jenkins, which is used for continuous integration. And of course, sending out an emails when the job gets failed, scheduling your jobs on an automated way, all that. So we're going to look at those things. Then we will look at a robot framework, which is a best example of a user acceptance testing level of framework, which is using the Selenium 2.0 as a library underneath it. So after you really understand the way of developing the scripts and everything, um, no, again, there was a question on how the videos will be available. These are important. Let me answer that. It will not be available you in the email. It will be available in the iTeLearn.com website. You all will be given an access to the specific course that you are going to join. So you log in with your credentials. When you log in with your credentials, you will be able to see only those videos that you have an access. We have the videos built over a period of 10 years. So you might not really have the access to everything unless you took the membership for everything. Depending on the course that you join, the videos will be available to you for a certain period that you have a membership, be it 1 year, 6 months, etc. Okay. Oh, let's so we're going to look at robot framework, which is Selenium using Selenium 2 library and kind of developed acceptance testing. And then we'll also talk about a Cucumber tool, which is used for behavior driven development. So we'll talk a little bit of what is test driven development, acceptance test driven development, behavior driven development, and then how do you use Cucumber tool for creating the. There again, we are going to create Selenium test, we are going to create a Jenkins test, and then we'll use it with Cucumber. So we'll mix and match of all these integration of all these advanced tools that we're going to learn. So that's how the course will go for about, to be frank, to talk about all these topics, I would really be needing at least 25 good working sessions. And as I told you, uh, not really 25. In fact, it's more than 30. And I have showed you in the beginning the schedule. Let me see if I can pull it up again. Yeah. So we're going to take this to orientation, then core WebDriver 15 sessions, Maven Jenkins 4 sessions, BDD Agile Scrum 2 sessions, Cucumber 4 sessions, Robot Framework 4 sessions, and then people who join for live project, you will have another 8 to 10 sessions. So typically in a 40-45 sessions of the whole thing, you will be mastered in the Selenium. That much I can confidently say. Uh, and post that, also you need to really practice good and then start applying for the jobs. So that's all I have for this orientation. Hope you all got an idea of what you're going to learn, what you're going to invest your time, how you're going to invest your time. But I would be happy to take up another set of questions if somebody has it in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Robot framework has been integrated with only Selenium 2.0 at this point of the time. So we'll have to wait and see when the 3.0 will be integrated. All right. Absolutely, you don't need to learn anything. You don't need to know anything. Just join the course. I will be taking you from a very fundamental level. I'm not expecting you that you know Java language or you know Selenium 2.0 when I say 3.0. Nothing of that sort. All I would know is you know what is a test case, how to do a basic functional testing manually. That will be good enough. Questions related to course fees and all, I would be happy to send out an email to learn@iTeLearn.com or sales.elearn at iTeLearn.com. So I'm not really the right person. I'm just a mentor or a facilitator here. I would not be really tracking all the course fees. Yes, immediately Cucumber is available. If you are a member, you can just go ahead and watch the video that I have just done a few days back on the Cucumber. It's about 3 weeks back I've done it, so it's very latest. So you can always start watching it. That's exactly. I will be helping you setting up Selenium environment. Oh, in your local PC. So the thing is how it's going to work is I will be showing everything it on my PC. The same thing that you would expect. And typically I'm going to majorly run it through on a Windows operating system. And I will also be giving you a guide on Mac operating system if somebody has it. But after that, unless you do it on your own and come back to us if you have a questions, I'll be sharing my email ID. So you can send out an email with a screenshot where you get struck, and I'm happy to help one-on-one. That's how it goes, but not really that I cannot go into all the 100 people that we're going to attend into their PCs and do it. I mean, you can understand the complexity there. But again, the biggest challenge is unless you do it. So I'm going to do step 1, 2, 3, 4 very detailed in my explanation, and you're going to repeat the same thing after watching the video. Nothing, there's no rocket science, no magic there. Okay. And if you get stuck, obviously you can send out an email to me. We need to install Selenium 3.0 and Eclipse before. That's where the first we need to install Java, then we need to install Eclipse, then we need to download Selenium files, then we have to integrate with our Selenium. So that's how the things will go. I too faced difficulties when I moved from a commercial tool to Selenium around 5 years back. Let me tell you, that is a frank. The commercial tools are like ready-made. You just install, everything is available. And open source, we have to do a little bit of homework for every single thing that we have to do. Sessions will be only from Monday to Friday. There won't be any weekend sessions, but you can happily watch the existing videos that we have. Come back with questions, and then we'll be helping you. All right, any other questions, team, before we wind up? No, I have differentiated it. Okay, where is that? Uh, this is something related to AACD, which is any odd certification developer. That is not part of the Selenium, so please ignore that. All we are going to do it on the Selenium is advanced. We are going to start from a beginner level and we are going to do it advanced level. So it's all advanced cover for you. There's a question, Selenium 3.0 compatible with all the latest version of Chrome, Firefox and browsers. I just covered it in my discussion. Previously, it used to take a long time because Selenium has to fix the problem. But now it is very quick. After Selenium has released the version, companies like Microsoft, Google they are fixing their browser side, and you can expect it so soon, should be available after any new release. So that should not be a problem. So frankly speaking, answers that I have already covered, I'm not going to really repeat it again. Somebody asking the same thing, do I need to know any language course before I coming to this? Absolutely no. All right, so I don't want to take too long of it on the orientation. So watch this video again. Come back on 19th. We will be having one more orientation session. Then on 26th onwards, the paid sessions will start. But on 19th itself, I will be helping you how to set up the required things. So you will take good time of 3 to 4 working days to set up the required and send back as an email if you get into any issues. But on 26th, we will be jumping onto the real learning sessions. All right. Okay, that's all for now. For anything else, please drop an email, learn@iTeLearn.com or sales.elearn@gmail.com. So anything should be fine. All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon on 19th.